more included, you will feel more engaged, and you will feel less lonely when you can see each other and we can connect with each other much better. Yeah, so if you can turn on your video. Wonderful, Lorena, Sasa, nice to see you. Wonderful, yes. Kathleen, Dolly, welcome, welcome everyone. This is our third edition of Let's Coach Live Masterclass. So welcome everybody. I wish you all a very, very warm welcome. We have a very, very interesting topic here today and a very, very interesting speaker. My good friend, Nick Jonsson, best-selling author. Yes, we are going to talk today about coaching strategies to overcome executive loneliness. This is really exciting. Even I am really excited, looking forward with great eagerness to this session. The CCMC Alumni is the organizer of this program, which is a monthly activity, and CCMC stands for Certified Chief Master Coach of ITD World. Thank you all so much. We have a very compelling vision to enable coaching culture everywhere, to positively touch the lives of over 100 million leaders with sponsored coaching programs and solutions. So thank you so much for joining and for being part of this activity. I'd like to say also a big thank you to our distinguished speaker, Nick Jonsson. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here with us, and to our committee members of CCMC Alumni Club. Guy Rouse, the president, raise your hand, you are here. Thank you so much. Guy Rouse is the president of CCMC Alumni, and vice presidents, master coaches, Rick, who is the CEO of TRG, Vietnam, Rick, and Floris, are you here with us? Floris, who is the vice president of Rosen, and master coach Murthy, who is HR director at Micron. Master coach Angela, are you with us? Yes. HR director at Western Digital. And master coach Gregory, who is the founder and COO of the Agency Factory. Thank you all so much for your support, for making this happen. Nice to see all of you. So without further ado, let me hand the floor over to the president of the CCMC Alumni, Mr. Guy Rouse. Let's give him a big hand. Over
Excellent.
to you, Guy.
Thank you, Dr. Peter. Thanks very much, Dr. Peter. Excellent. And it's lovely to see everyone and all these wonderful faces, happy faces. It's great to see it. So a special thank you, Dr. Peter, and a special real thanks to ITD as always for sponsoring and supporting this masterclass. And of course, as you mentioned, the CCMC Alumni is a group of master coaches who want to grow coaching culture everywhere. And through this Let's Coach Masterclass, we really continue to grow leaders, grow coaches around the world, and to share the value of coaching. Now, as Coach Rick mentioned earlier, Master Coach Rick, we do write in the chat if you haven't done so already, where you're from, just what your name is, because a lot of people that don't know you, as much as ITD might know where you're from, a lot of others don't. So do tell us where you're from. It's always great to hear from you. Write your questions or comments in the chat as well. And then sometime towards the end, about 10 minutes, we're going to have some questions and answers where we'll let you have the chance to put those questions to Jonsson. So I'm honored to introduce today our masterclass speaker, Nick Jonsson. Nick Jonsson is the co-founder and managing director of EGN, that's Executives Global Network in Singapore. It's a leading networking platform for executives. And Nick is also an ICF coach and a #1 bookseller, international bookseller with his book, Executive Loneliness. And now Nick Jonsson has worked across Asia, he's worked across Australia and Europe, and he's represented a lot of international firms where he serves as the vice chairman as well on the Nordic Chamber of Commerce in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. Now, I like to give a quote. Mother Teresa said, "Of all the diseases I've known, loneliness is the worst." Well, today Nick Jonsson will help us to develop our coaching strategies to overcome loneliness. So without further ado, I give you Nick Jonsson a very warm welcome. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Guy, and thank you also, Peter, for the warm introduction. It's great to be with ITD World again. I met you, as we just spoke about before, in Vietnam and in Indonesia, and there's so many great things coming out of the pandemic, in the sense that we can get together like this tonight here. I'm so excited to be with you here tonight and talk about a topic which perhaps in some people, when you hear talking about loneliness, it comes with perhaps some stigma or negativism. But as we will learn today, we can cope with it. There are strategies for ourselves and for our coaches, but also our colleagues and family around us to deal with. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, and I'm looking forward to spending the next hour with you. But before I introduce myself and share with you my story, I would like to check in with you to see how you are. And I'm aware that Brandon has kindly helped us to put together 4 poll questions that he can launch now. And they are anonymous, so please answer the questions as honestly as you can, because it will set the tone for this evening. Brandon, thanks. Over to you. So the first question here is, do your coaches bring up the topic of loneliness? It's a single choice. So please pick if they never, rarely, occasionally, sometimes, often, or very often bring up the topic of loneliness. Then you can go to question 2. So you can answer all these 4 questions in your time. They will all come in one go. I think we can share the result now. So let's look at the results.
Hi, Nick. Aaron here, one of the co-hosts.
Yes.
It's only 5 out of 50 have participated. Do you want to give more time before we
Yes,
share the results?
let's give 30 seconds more to answer the questions.
All right, awesome.
I'm trying to answer the question. Can someone tell me how do I answer? Because I couldn't find a way of answering the question. What do I need to do to answer?
You just click on the poll.
I can't see the question. I can't see the question on my screen.
I think the poll might have already closed, so we can't answer the poll. Should we reshare the poll again?
Okay, Brandon, maybe you relaunch it just briefly.
Okay, sure.
It's relaunched now. Can you see it now?
Yeah, we see it.
There's 4 questions. Let's just see if you can answer them. Don't think too much about the answer. Whatever comes natural to you, it's only one, to click one, and then you go to the next question. Oh yes, I can see a lot of answers now. Already 30% participated, almost there. How are we doing, Brandon? Should we give 15 seconds more?
It's all up to you.
Yes, we have 60. Yes, I think we have the majority in 10 seconds is fine, Brandon.
Okay. It's all up to you.
Yes, we have 60. Yes, I think we have the majority in 10 seconds is fine, Brandon.
Okay. It's all up to you.
Okay, let's launch the result, please. Okay. Can you see the results?
Yes.
Okay. Brandon, can you see that also? So if we see, I see now the first question here. The first question was, do your coaches bring up the topic of loneliness? And I can see that the winner was rarely and never and occasionally. It's only 3% to say very often, 5% say often. So this is exactly the point that I thought would come up here, that people don't talk about loneliness. It's just a topic that has so much stigma that actually it's not very common that people even talk about it. So this is exactly what I expected it to be, even in this audience. Can we look at the question number 2 now? Brandon, do you know how to move to number 2, the result?
You just scroll up,
Okay.
scroll up.
Okay, so everyone had scrolled by themselves. Okay. So number 2 was, do you ever suspect your coaches are suffering from loneliness, even though they don't talk about it? And if we look at a result there, I can see that you occasionally and sometimes think that. So obviously they are hiding something here that you cannot really picture. And indeed, it can be loneliness. And I will show you some findings later on about basically how lonely people are these days. Then number 3, how much have you suffered from loneliness yourself this past year? And I see that it's quite very often, sometimes it's actually no one of you who clicked that you never have suffered from loneliness in the past year and a half. So I think that's also a good summary of indeed where we are these days with the pandemic. And then we come to the last question, which I know many people feel a bit uncomfortable with answering. Have you ever felt suicidal? The most of you say never here. There's quite a few, though, over 30% once or twice in your life, 5% sometimes, 3% say many times. So here it shows again how common it is to have suicidal thoughts. And as you will hear in my talk today, there's a fine line between being very well and being lonely, and when that can tip over to having suicidal thoughts. It's a very fine line there, and that is what I will talk through you today. So thanks for that, Paul. And now I will start sharing my slides. So my name is Nick Jonsson, and I spent the last 2 years studying the topic of loneliness. So thanks again for inviting me tonight to talking about overcoming loneliness and coaching strategies. So let's look into also globally. Thank you for the local poll, so we get a temperature of where we are today. So what I found when I studied this subject is that 33% of adults are suffering from loneliness worldwide. And it's important to say that everyone feels lonely from time to time. If you're home alone, you might feel lonely after a while, but it's different from suffering from loneliness. Suffering from loneliness can be that you are in a room with your family, with your friends, and yet you feel lonely. It is missing that connection within yourself and to other people. So 33% of people are suffering from loneliness worldwide. That's a huge number. And I wanted to see if this is really also correct with where I'm based in Singapore. I did a poll here in 2019, and it showed that 30% of the people I polled in Singapore were suffering from loneliness. So that shows that it's quite aligned with the global numbers. Perhaps the people I interviewed was feeling a bit better. Then I wanted to check in with executives here in Singapore a year ago, so during the pandemic, by the end of last year, to see how they were. Can you guess how many percent of them during the pandemic were suffering from loneliness? You can write in the chat box if you think how many percent. So write a number there. Do you think it was the same 30%? Do you think it was more? Let me see some numbers in there. Someone said 60%, more, 60%, 50%, 55, 45, 80%. Well, you're pretty spot on here, because the numbers that we got was 59%. So we can actually see a doubling in the loneliness. And this is very important to know. Why? Because you have family, colleagues around it, and you need to be aware as well about how your own well-being is. And for your coaches, it means that we have seen a doubling in loneliness in 1 year due to, of course, the working from home, the pandemic have separated us. So this is the environment we are in at the moment. So what about when an executive suffers from loneliness? Let's check in with you what you think about how many of them do you think don't talk about it. So if you or someone is suffering with loneliness, will they tell the HR, will they tell the boss about it? How many percent? Can you get some numbers here to this one? Do you think it's 10%, 20, 50, 75%? Give me some numbers. How many percent do you think will actually keep it secret, who wouldn't talk to the bosses and the company about it? 10%, 80, 99%, 80%, 30, secret 90%. Yeah, most of you are pretty spot on. Actually, what we found out in the survey of senior executives in Singapore is that 84% wouldn't tell the company about it. Why? Because they're scared perhaps that they won't get the next promotion. Maybe there will be gossips in the company. So people rather hold this secretly. This loneliness is something that they don't want to discuss with the boss. They try to keep it secret. And then the next question then is, how many seek help for it? What do you think? If someone is suffering here, how many percent of them do you think actually going to seek help? Go and see a doctor, go and see a psychologist. Give me some number in the chat box here. How many percent will not go and seek help? I see 10%, 95, 15%, 5, 10, 90, 60. I'm going to give you the number that the Mental Health Foundation in the UK, they did a huge study on this in 2019. Actually, 75% of people suffering from loneliness will not seek help for it either. Again, because of the stigma, they were scared to be seen at the psychologist or a therapist or seeing at the doctor. Others were scared that it will show up in medical report. So mental health is not something that people go and seek help for. If we break an arm, there's no stigma to go and get the arm plastered. But if it's something related to loneliness, stress, depression, or mental health related, it's not socially acceptable, it seems, still today. So this is the problem that we're facing today, and that is what we need to uncover here today. So today I will share with you, first of all, my story. And then I will share with you how to spot the coachee who's suffering from loneliness. Then thirdly, I will share what questions you can ask your coachee suffering from loneliness. And then finally, how to help your coachee who's suffering from loneliness. So that's the 4 parts we will go through here today. So let me then start by sharing my story with you. So I've had a successful career. I worked across Asia, mainly in Vietnam, Indonesia, as a GM for various companies, including International SOS, a big medical company. So if you ask me, I had a reasonably successful career. I'm an athlete as well, as you can see on the picture there. I'm quite serious about my marathon running and cycling and so on. So if you look from the outside, it looks perhaps like I had a good career, a charmed life. I've had good expat packages and everything else. These days, though, my life has changed. I have left the corporate world. Today, I work at a company called EGN in Singapore, where we facilitate these small, confidential peer group meetings where senior executives and business owners can discuss the work-related challenges they have. So it's a way for them to don't feel so lonely in the work, because they can perhaps always be some things that they cannot discuss with the boss, so they can take it inside to our confidential meeting where everyone signed an NDA so they can discuss it. So because of that environment, which I've been in the last 5 years, I listened to and I joined hundreds of these meetings, and I could just understand how lonely the senior executives are. That's why in 2019, I created a poll where I was questioning them about the stress level, anxiety and depression and everything else. And I was quite shocked with the findings that I got from this survey. And that actually was so inspiring for me to see how challenging it actually was for them, that I decided to start writing a book about it. And I have a copy here of my book, and it's about executive loneliness, and the book then about the 5 pathways to overcome isolation, stress, anxiety, and depression in the modern business world. So that is a topic that I now have therefore studied for almost 2 years as I've been writing that book. And I will give you a bit of an insight today in regards to this book. And it's as I started to write the book and I shared the findings that I was drafting in the book with the media, they got very interested. Here is from a cover of the Business Times, which is a newspaper in Singapore. It was a 4 pages feature, which was the biggest piece on mental health in Singapore's history. That was a topic that people didn't want to talk about, loneliness in Singapore. I've had multiple of these full pages in the Straits Times and other leading publications in Singapore. And I'm not mentioning this to rag or to show off. I'm just explaining that this was the first time in Singapore they've seen that people, senior executives, are exposing themselves in the press. That's how new it was to people here in Singapore. And I know it's the same in many other countries where you are in Southeast Asia. It's just something that we don't speak about. So let me then share with you my story. So in 2018, I thought I was going to die. I was mentally ill. I was in fact so ill that I had reached a point where I've written my will and my testament, and I thought that I couldn't go on any longer. Then suddenly it was something that saved my life, and I will share with you today what was it that saved my life. But for you to fully understand what happened to me, let me take you back 10 years earlier to 2008, when I was living and working in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. I was working for a Swedish cosmetic company there. I had all the career going well for me. I reached a couple of promotions and so on. But suddenly I was laid off from my work. It was following a conflict with my boss, and I came home and I told my ex-wife at the time that I just had been laid off from my work. She said, "Nick, I'm pregnant." So just out of a movie, I lost my work, had a wife who was pregnant, and I was in a foreign country and I didn't know what to do. The natural thing for any person would of course have been to perhaps move home to your home country to explain it and to admit to people what happened. But I decided to basically keep it secret. This was not a good place for me to be, and I was fighting by myself. I didn't have anyone to speak to. I didn't have any mentor. I didn't have any coach who I can explain what happened to me. I dealt with it all by myself. And I remember I had so much anger against my company, and I didn't have anyone who could help me to take through that. I just kept applying for jobs until I managed to get a new job. And I worked my way up in this organization. I did quite okay. They then promoted me to a bigger role in Indonesia. And just as I moved over to Indonesia with my now ex-wife and my son, he was then born and was 5 years old. As soon as we found a place to live in Jakarta, Indonesia, my new company was sold and I was let go again. So this was the second time I find myself away from home and let go. And it was again a big blow to my ego. I didn't want to explain to anyone what had happened. And again, I kept it secret. And I just couldn't deal with having my son out of school and my ex-wife there as well. So I just sent them back to Sweden. I said, "Why don't you go home, both of you, and just leave me here? I will sort something out." So here I was in a new city, new country, and by myself. Didn't know anyone, didn't really have any friends. And I started to pick up some bad habits. I lost appetite for cycling. I lost the appetite for running. Instead, I turned to alcohol. So I went to the bar after work, drinking, and not being very healthy. I managed to get a new job. I did well in this job also, worked very hard, and I didn't have much else to do. But I was constantly anxious. I was worried that I would be fired. I was worried I would be laid off. I remember looking in my email inbox, always looking for emails from my boss, looking for that email, waiting for the call to be terminated. And in fact, it played so much in my head that I was going crazy. I was just not feeling safe at all in the job. So it went so far that I handed in the resignation instead, because I thought it's better I'm in control of this. I'm resigning from these people instead of them terminating me and me losing a third job here. when they got the resignation, they were shocked, surprised. They said, "What's wrong? You did so well in your job." And I was just in another place in my mind. It was just no way I could have stayed there. So here I was now 3 times outside of a job, didn't know what to do, and I was completely lost. I got an assignment, then a temporary assignment, to go over to Vietnam to help a company I'm working for now, EGN, but I was not in a good place. I came over there realizing that I needed help. I needed medication, I needed doctors, I needed probably more than that, and I couldn't find that in Vietnam. So when I had a chance in 2018 to move over to Singapore, I did so, knowing that potentially there should be more help for me in Singapore. Here's a photo of me. In 2018, I gained a lot of weight, and while I'm smiling there, I call it in my book a smiling depression. I put on a good smile, a good face. On the outside, my career was going well. My parents had no idea that I was suffering inside. Not even my close friends knew that I was really suffering. It was nothing I spoke about, even to my best friends. And this inside, I was really, really hurting. I, at this stage, had panic attacks and so on, and my blood pressure was really high. I started to be scared that I would get a heart attack, and I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. And let me show you a picture of my foot in April 2018. It was so swollen, I had to go to the doctor. They did X-ray, MRI. They couldn't find anything wrong with it. It was only later on a psychologist diagnosed this as a psychosomatic disorder, which is a disease which is basically built up on stress and anxiety. So you can imagine when my outside is looking like this, how I was feeling inside. I can just remembering lying in the bed, being so scared and thinking I was going to die. I wasn't suicidal. I wasn't suicidal at this stage. I just knew I was going to die from being so sick. So that's the point when I wrote my testament and my will, because I didn't want to leave a mess behind me to my relatives. But then, having surrendered at that moment and really gone that far that I accepted that I was not going to live much longer, things turned around and I started to come back. And I will share with you later today also what was it that made that switch. But just as I started to come back and getting back to life, something happened. A disaster actually struck. This is my friend Simon. He suddenly died of suicide in Singapore. He had everything going for him. He worked in the HR field and an expert on future work, and he was going to speak at one of our company events at EGN. He didn't show up, and we were trying to reach him. The next day I got the message that he was dead, and I also that day found out that it was from suicide. We were all shocked to know this. I contacted his friends, his family, and no one suspected anything. Simon had just been to Mount Everest, and he had climbed up to the base camp, which was one of his biggest dreams in life. So he was just back in Singapore when this happened from that trip. He had a girlfriend he loved. He had just made a post on Facebook saying that he has never been happier in his whole life. That's what we saw on the outside. We had no idea. No one had any idea that he was actually suffering. So that is the point when I realized that how close I must have been to being in the state of Simon, and how close it must be for many other people to be there, because that loneliness, and when you're losing hope as a human, in that loneliness, you can make some terrible decisions. And when you lose that hope, everything is just turning dark. And it is by not speaking to someone. That is certainly what is happening. Simon, if he would have just shared honestly how he felt, then help would have been there. If I have shared that I needed help when I was sick, I would have got it. But instead, we tend to keep it secret and silent and not talk about it due to the stigma. We don't want to be seen as weak. So here I was with a good friend of mine, then having just died of suicide. And I called his brother, which I knew was very close to him, and asked his brother, what could I do to help? I started to help with cleaning up things in Singapore after him, closing down his LinkedIn account and various things that we could help out with. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to take action. And that's when I launched a campaign here in 2019 Race to an End of Executive Loneliness. So it was a charity campaign for SOS Samaritans, which is a suicide agency in Singapore, a hotline where people can call. And I decided to do a race, to do an Ironman race and donate money and funds and raise awareness for this beautiful organization where I'm still a volunteer today. The campaign went viral. People all over the world started to write to me, people who said that they had relatives who they lost to suicide, and they were so happy that someone finally started to talk about this, because it was topics that, at least in Asia, that was not spoken about. So that's when I really understood that I was onto a topic that no one wanted to talk about, and I decided that I should talk about it. As I then started to research the topic further, and I got into radio interviews, newspaper interviews, and so on, I kept being asked, so what is loneliness? And I think you can write in the text box now, what does loneliness mean to you, or suffering from loneliness? What does it mean to you? And I will, in the same time, explain what it meant to me. So what it means to suffer from loneliness, and yeah, loss of meaning in life. Thank you, Alex. Anyone else? When nothing makes you happy, no one to talk to, being apart from the family, hopeless. Yeah, it's all right. So what loneliness meant to me during that stage, it was basically that I could be with my family in the same room, with my best friends, and still feeling lonely. I say that it is when you lost the connection, when you're not happy and in love yourself, or you basically don't feel connected with yourself. How can you then be connected to other people? So if you are in a room full of other people, you still feel lonely. You don't want to be there. You rather isolate at home and just be by yourself, because you just don't feel happy about being around other people. You're lacking these high quality relationships, and that is what loneliness meant to me. Then I was asked on radio, because I work with executives, and with executives I don't just mean senior executives, because loneliness can go in all levels at organizations, but I work with senior executives. So when they ask me what is executive loneliness, I said that it can be lonely at the top, and the higher you go in a company, the more lonely it gets. The CEO only have perhaps themselves at their level. If you're a manager, perhaps you have a few colleagues, but if you don't talk to them, it gets lonely at that spot in the organization as well. And as we saw earlier, a vast majority don't talk about their loneliness in the company. So it can be very, very lonely to work in an organization. But is it only an organization? Is it only executives? No, it can even be millionaires. It can be, we've seen so many successful rich people who also have died of suicide and who suffered from loneliness. Here is a picture from Viggy Sindhata. He was one of the founders of a huge coffee company in India, a billionaire, and he died of suicide in 2019. And then many people perhaps know this book written by Tony Shi, which is a book about happiness, how to create a happy culture in the company that people really read because they want to be happy and create a happy culture. Yet he died just the end of last year by suicide as well. And this is exactly what I mean in my book when I talk about the smiling depression. And by the way, I had a pleasure myself to go to Las Vegas in 2013, where I saw Anthony Robbins, but also I joined Tony for 3 days at his Delivering Happiness boot camp. So, I mean, where is the world gone when someone who's writing books about happiness, delivering boot camps about happiness to be connected, when they themselves fall off and suffered by loneliness, depression, and indeed die by suicide. So that is just so sad. And it just shows that this does affect billionaires. It affects everyone. And that's why we need to look out for people around us. So then I come to the question then, which we're really going to dig into deeper here now today, how to then overcome loneliness. Well, I draw only one conclusion. It is about speak. It is about talking. It's about asking the right question. Or as a good friend of mine has written a book, Andy Lopata, he wrote a book, Just Ask. That's what it's all about. It's about speaking up and talking to each other, because That's what Simon didn't do, and that's what I didn't do. And just to round up my story and take you back to when I was lying there with a swollen foot, and I was sure I was going to die, and when I was turning to alcohol after work to relax, and when I was overweight and I lost the happiness inside me, it was indeed that I was keeping secret. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I didn't have a coach or a mentor or a close friend who I dared to be vulnerable with. So that was the whole problem. As soon as I decided to then tell my new wife, who I married in April 2018, that I was not well, I started to come back to life. I then went to see a doctor. I told the doctor what happened. I then got help and I started to feel better. I got a coach, a fitness coach, who started to help me to lose my weight, get better diet, sort out the sleep and everything else. And with the help of the coach, I started to feel some progress, and I was coming back to life. And very, very quickly, here in just 1 month, basically, the loneliness, my depression, anxiety, everything disappeared so quickly when I just started to speak to people who was listening to with empathy to what I had to say. So that was the beginning of my transformation journey then. And here am I on pictures. If you see the race I finished there, that's in 2019. So just 1 year basically after that photo where you saw me so fat and almost given up on life, I was completing an Ironman race. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a race where in 1 day you swim 3.8 kilometer, you cycle 180 kilometer, and then you run a full marathon, 42 kilometer. And if you see on the sign there, Jonsson, which it says there, is me, under 13 hours finish line. So isn't that amazing what you actually can do when you put your mind to it? And that's really my recovery journey. And here, by the way, the newspaper clipping, there is a full page in the Business Times. They interviewed me. And again, I'm talking about physical wellness and mental recovery, words here, which no one wants to talk about in the press, but I decided to do it. And as I started to do it, others are now feeling more comfortable in Singapore to also share their mental recovery, because these are the stories we need to share and we need to talk about it. And according to me, it's been a wonderful recovery journey. And that's why I'm sharing it with you today, because I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't that I spoke up and I had the coaches, the mentors, and the right people around me during this time. So the key learning here to share is that if you have something on your mind, speak it up, but also look out for then your coaches and so on if they have something. So that was my story. And I'm now going to go over to what we wanted to cover today. We will have question and answers also at the end of this. So how do you then spot if a coach is suffering from loneliness? Because as we saw in the poll, not everyone will be honest with you and tell you. Most people will perhaps try to hide it. They are shy to talk about it. So how do you spot it? Well, look for the signs. I mean, in my case, I gained a lot of weight. I didn't sleep well. I drank alcohol, all these things. So normally you can see weight gain or weight loss, change in habits. If it's a mother who suddenly lose appetite in looking after the child, or someone who played the guitar every day for 5-7 years suddenly lose interest and stop with that, it can also be something to look out for. Or perhaps someone who have a lot of people they know but not close friends. All of these things, or suddenly they go quiet on the WhatsApp chat, or you don't hear from them by email. All of these things, look out for them. But people can normally smile and hide behind the smile, so be very careful. So that's just some things that you can look for in your coaches. Then the third, what questions can you ask your coaches who you believe are suffering from loneliness if you want to help them? Well, I prepared one slide for you today, which I thought I was going to share with you. And I will actually, after my talk today, share it on my LinkedIn profile where you can get it, or we can also send it out to you if you want. Here they are. There's powerful loneliness coaching questions, which I found. Daniel Russell at the University of Southern California has put them together. So these could be some powerful questions. I want you actually to give it a thought also. What questions can you ask? Feel free to write here in the chat box what powerful loneliness questions would you ask? Perhaps I can get a few examples here. If you suspect someone is suffering or they are suffering from loneliness, what would you ask your coachee? Abraham writes, what can you do to feel more connected to yourself? Great. Anyone else? And then we have Lorena who's writing, how often do you offer a genuine smile to yourself and others? Yeah, what a great one. Yeah, you can keep thinking about that and save the good ones, because I'm going to ask you to comment later on my LinkedIn post when I make it with some questions, so we can get that going. Rick wrote, what favorite hobby do you feel you do not want to do anymore? Yeah, that's a great one indeed. In my case, it was running and cycling. I completely lost interest in it. And Dr. Peter Shee, right? How do you feel about the quality of your relationships? Yes. Rita, please describe where you are now. What does it look like, smell like? Yeah, great to be connecting with the senses. Okay, thanks for all these questions there. One thing I wanted to share with you also, as you're working with your coaches who perhaps might be suffering, is something that is very important. And it's a warning I want to say here, because I'm currently working with a few executives who are suffering from loneliness to the stage where 2 of them have had suicidal thoughts. It's very important to you, if you're a coach, that you clearly put the barriers for what you can do and what you can't do. I always work in tandem with a counselor, therapist, or a doctor who also give them the medical attention. And what I do as a coach is to work with them on the goals. One woman, for example, who is in her early 50s, who gone through a divorce and who picked up the alcohol habit, drinking too much, who's not well, and she's very lonely and depressed. While she's seeing a psychologist for her issues, I'm working with her to help her to sleep better, to repair her relationships. I'm also working with her on her eating habits, exercise. She's tracking how many steps she's walking per day, and we report and we discuss back and forth. So I give her some hope in between her sessions and when she's going through it. So that is what we can do as a coach. And I am very careful that I don't step in and trying to do the job of a professional counselor. We have to be very, very careful for this. But we can guide them, we can help them, we can give them motivation and give them they can have as on the to-do list, and one action point can be for them to go and have a blood test. And the next week, when you see them again, you can at least discuss if they went to see the doctor and so on. So many people from suffering from loneliness need this motivation, and that's where I see our place as a coach to help them and to be their guidance on the side. I see here also Rick says, so here we see Rita, absolutely agree, they need to seek professional help too, or see a coach who is also a counselor. Yes, this works very well. In my case now, I collaborate with 2 different counselors, 1 man, 1 woman. So when you're talking through them, if they want some help at the end of the session, you can refer them to someone if they don't see someone. Then the last question for today then, how to help your coaches if they are suffering from loneliness. And this is really what I wrote in my book. So this is what my whole book was about, and it's really the 5 chapters. So I wrote in my book 5 chapters, and the first point is that you can help them to take stock. What I mean with that is almost like doing an inventory of themselves, whether you really need to look into, what's the problems. In my case, it was I was drinking alcohol. I didn't sleep. I didn't exercise. I just gone through divorce. I had not made amends. I had left a lot of problems behind. I was owing money here. I didn't leave my companies in a big way, in a good way. There was many things. So here taking stock is writing down in a spreadsheet, perhaps with them, just identify, pick the brain, what is all the issues that is there. You can go through the wheel of life with them where they can rate from 1 to 10 in all areas, what's happening in their life and so on. So that's where I see as a coach where you can really start to uncover what it is they need help with. And that's the first chapter in my book. Then the second one is indeed encourage them to ask for help. So again, you are the coach. Maybe they need to go on a fitness plan with a gym. Maybe they need a nutritionist, a dietist, which you cannot help them with. They need to see a doctor or many other things. So that's what I mean, again, just to emphasize that as a coach, we cannot do everything. And then it's really to help them get healthy here. This is setting targets for the food, the sleep, and exercise, which typically if someone suffering from loneliness, that is the absolutely essential. A lot of things are fixed, and in my case, these were the things that really put me back to life. Then it's often about the relationships, because if someone's suffering from loneliness, it probably means that they have many broken relationships with wives, parents, sisters, brothers that need to be repaired. So help your coaches to list down who are those people and help them and come up with a plan how they can go back and make amends and say sorry and apologize and repair these relationships. There's another coachee I'm working with now, and he made a list of 20 people that he had harmed. Every week we meet, he go back to one person every week. So we will work for 20 weeks now to repair 20 of his relationships with old companies and with his sister and many things. And every time I see him, when he repaired one of them, he come back and he's lighter on his shoulder and he feel good about it. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to repair relationship. And we as coaches can do a wonderful job here. Then the fifth and perhaps the most important is, if someone feel lonely, most likely they have not found, they've lost the purpose. May it be a connection to a God or a power greater than themselves or something. Many times they are so self-centered, too egoistic, that they're all in their head. And your job then as a coach is to really help them here to find their purpose. And this is what I discuss in detail in the book. And this is the ultimate fifth step then that helped me. I say now that the greatest gift for me was to go through this recovery journey, and I must give back this recovery journey for the rest of my life. Now I'm blessed to do it as a coach, but I'm also there as a volunteer. Most mornings, including tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., I'm volunteering still for the Samaritans, the suicide agency, and another mental health organization in Singapore, where I do community service to give back the gift to those people who are suffering now. And that is my purpose now. I found my purpose, and that is really, really helping me to feel great about myself. And to just discuss this today is something that I'm grateful for because it's helping me to give back. And my last slide for tonight before we take questions is some good news came in last night. So about the project I've been working on, I won actually 2 PR awards this year. The one you see on the top there is last night came in another PR award. It just shows again that this so unique that someone actually is talking on this topic in the open, honestly, because we used to talk about all our successes rather than our struggle. And that's what I've been doing. And I think to share this with you tonight is a great opportunity, especially since you all are coaches. And thanks for making such a difference. Thanks for listening tonight, and now I wanted to open up for questions and answers to everyone here. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Nick, sorry. Everyone, if you have any questions, put up your hand, and don't be shy. Feel free to send them out. So I suppose to get this started, Nick, I would say, what was the single most thing or the single item that brought you the quickest, or that brought you out of your depression, or what was that single most action that you did that helped you most?
It was speaking. It was certainly by starting to speak. So it was I told my new wife, who I just married, then how I felt inside me. And as soon as I did that, I felt better. And then I went to see basically a support group, and where I shared how I felt. And I remember walking out from that support group meeting just feeling such a relief. And so then I decided to come back. In this support group I joined, they have basically a recommendation that when you join something like this, that you should join 90 days in a row. So I kept doing for 90 days, and every day I walked out of there feeling better. So yeah, to answer your question very quickly, Guy, it's speaking up, asking questions.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. I see there's a question from Rick.
Yes, Rick, please.
Yeah, thanks again, Nick, for a great talk. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable to the whole world. So, my question is, if a person feels lonely, as we saw from the polls, people feel lonely from time to time. Okay, so is there something an individual can do, or something we can suggest to our coachees on a daily basis to help them not fall into a loneliness trap?
Yes, be vulnerable and talk, because if we want to expect someone to be honest and open with us, we need to perhaps disclose something else ourselves, maybe with our children or our parents or relatives or friends or colleagues. And if you go in and you be vulnerable with a colleague of yours and you say that you're going through a difficult time now and you explain something, they will most often listen with empathy. And after that, how often is it that they will reply saying, oh, by the way, I also went through that last year, or my wife is going through that right now. And once that happens, suddenly you're building that trust. You're both being vulnerable with each other. And Rick, let me just very briefly share with you one story, because there's one lady who is inside a book that I interviewed, who worked in the bank industry, and she went through loneliness and depression so far that she actually planned her own suicide. She rehearsed it twice. She didn't execute it. Luckily, she got help just in time. But when she decided to disclose his story in the book, and she later on shared, she gave a copy of the book to all her colleagues in her department, about 15 colleagues. And she said, by the way, that story in this book is me. And they were all shocked. And actually, everyone then came to her and they dared to share their story, what they were going through. Even her boss came and shared that he was going through a challenging time. And this department is one department that's gone through a COVID stronger than any other department I know, just because they were so vulnerable by this very senior executive sharing with her team that she gone through a pattern where she was suicidal herself. So that is one tip then, to really, really dare to be vulnerable. And if you want to have one homework for today, all of you think about one thing that one person you can be vulnerable with and open up to, and you will just have, that will be the beginning of a beautiful relationship. And I see some questions here in the group.
Fantastic.
Let me see here. We have from Alex. When do you know that the case of loneliness of your coach is already beyond your capacity as a coach? I would say, Alex, if in doubt, expect that it is beyond. You can never be safe enough, is what I would say, because we're dealing with perhaps clinical illness here, or so people will naturally hide it. So if you even see signs about it, you probably only see the tip of the iceberg. So if you can then recommend them to see someone, or I mean, as a coach, we don't try to lead people, but at the end of the session, you can perhaps give them a list of phone numbers, and that's what I included in my book. Actually, I have, and on my website, if you actually scan the QR code, I have a whole page with support and hotline, so you can just say, by the way, if you're not feeling great, here is some resources for you. So that would be my advice there. We have a question also here from Monette. What do you do when your coachee you suspect the suffering from loneliness, refuse to get professional help? yeah, that you just have to keep asking the right question and try to find the motivation. And as coaches, we need to dig deep sometimes, right? And asking them the right questions. Perhaps someone can help me there. What question would you ask if they are refusing to get help? What would be the benefits of? How would you feel if you were getting help? And all these kind of questions is what I could think of. Peter?
I would go with what you have said just now, Nick, that vulnerability. So as a coach, you share your own failures, your own mistakes, your own sufferings and things that you have been through. And typically, once the trust level is high, then the other person begins to open up. So it doesn't have to be coaching. It can just be sharing, being vulnerable and sharing your own mistakes and your own difficulties will get the other person to open up.
Yes, Peter, and that's true, and that's why, as everyone can imagine now, because my book is out there and I'm sharing my whole story there, people dare to be vulnerable with me, which is great for me now as a coach, because they will come and they will be so open, so vulnerable, because they read my book and also in the newspaper, that they don't feel shy to tell me how they feel. By the way, I wanted
Fantastic. Any other questions?
I will just also let you know here, if you want to scan, if you scan this down here, connect with me on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, feel free to send me a message if you want. And by the way, I have a gift for you, which is a free copy of my book. I have it as a PDF, as an ebook, to anyone that will connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a message with your email. Then I will send you a free copy of the book if you're interested.
Wow, that's fantastic. Lovely. Thank you very much. Excellent. Rick, you have your hand up, I see.
Yeah, I'll give you maybe a final question. Is there, or have you uncovered any common factors amongst these people or these executives who have this feeling of loneliness, apart from the fact that they are lonely? Is there something else that's, something common across all of them?
Yeah, I think most seems to be high achievers who want to go very far, and that's perhaps the reason why people are high achievers. They need to show to themselves that they can do so much, and perhaps also many seem to be perhaps too selfish, driving, wanting to have success for themselves rather than for others. And that is what I meant with I had to crash that far in order to really come back. And my life is completely different these days by now giving back to my society and being a volunteer and so on. That was a world that I didn't spend too much time in. I was spending too much time in my own head trying to look good and doing the right thing like that. And that is what I see with many, at least at the top, that selfishness, which is not serving us well.
Excellent. I think there's another question in the chat.
Yes, let's see, Michelle, right?
I think as coaches, our ability to withhold judgment, whether felt or spoken, could also create a psychological safe space for coaches to share vulnerability. Lovely sharing.
Yes, Michelle, well said. Yeah, I agree.
Fantastic. I think if there's no more questions, then Nick, I suppose there's a lot of food for thought tonight.
There's an important question in the chat from Monette.
Okay, let me see it. Monette, thank you. Can you inform the coach's family member if you suspect the coach is on the brink of suicide? It could be an ethical question too, right? Wow, that's a difficult question. And yeah, does anyone have some tip there? Depending on the coaching agreement, I would say, right?
I would seek permission. I think
in many ways, whatever you do is wrong.
Yeah. I would seek permission from the coachee and encourage the coachee to inform and seek permission.
Yes, that's what happened, Peter, in the case of the lady who's in my book. Actually, the coachee asked for permission to connect with her husband, and they met and they had a conversation about it, and that saved her life. So yeah, it can be a lifesaver right there. Yeah. And if in doubt, call a psychologist, call someone who is a clinical, who is a specialist. If ever in doubt, it's one call extra is better than no call.
Well, thank you so much, Nick. It has been a very, very inspiring and enlightening session this evening, even 1 hour. We feel, and I feel, that we should learn more from you. We want to have more. There's not enough of you, Nick, today. It's so inspiring and uplifting. You have been vulnerable. You have shared your stories. You have shared statistics. You have involved the audience. It's been really awesome. You have given even us solutions and steps how to go about it. I think this is a very pertinent topic. And as you have very well said, you know, the number of people feeling lonely has actually doubled, right? It has doubled during the pandemic. So the problem, the issue is even more serious than anyone can imagine. So there is a lot of need out there, and there's a lot of help needed. And the way how you have put it, I mean, so appropriately in the sense that it can affect anyone, even billionaires, the most successful people who are surrounded by others all the time can feel lonely. So that is something that, you know, it's not being expressed out, and it's something that is unspoken, right? The stigma behind it. So I think you have shined that light on it very, very well. And not only that, I think you have highlighted the importance of being vulnerable and speaking up. And the importance where a coach comes in is having that listening ear and that empathy, right? Where it really helps someone to release out their burden and their pains and to overcome, you know, their loneliness. Is really working with someone who really cares about the leader. Could be a coach and other forms of help as well. And I think what you have also been is as a great role model to all of us here today, because as you have said, those 5 things that you do to help people overcome that, the 5th one is just so important, where you have highlighted the fact that helping people find their purpose, living a purposeful life, purpose-driven life filled with passion, adding value to others, rather than being self-centered and egoistic. As a leader, an executive can be so successful, so high up, reach up to the pinnacle of their success, and yet still feel lonely. And in fact, very often top executives and CEOs rise to the very top, and they feel very much lonely at the top on their own, because they don't have people that they can really talk to, you know, in terms of their true problems and feelings. They can't be vulnerable to the people who look at them as role models and look to them as the pillar of strength. And so this is where the coach comes in. And finally, what I would say is that as coaches, many of you are coaches here and master coaches. And as we coach people and help people through that loneliness, we also have to realize ourselves that we as master coaches may be having that as well, and recognize that. Why? Because no man or woman is an island. Even a coach needs a coach. Even a doctor needs a doctor. A doctor cannot treat himself or herself or her own family. So as a coach, we all still need a coach. And I realized that long time ago. So I continuously have people to coach me, even my peers, team members, and family members and friends, and even my coaches turn out at the end, eventually, some of them even become my coach. So we are all here to use our lives in service and adding value to each other. And by doing so, building great relationships and trust among each other, feeling safe to express and talk. And then, so therefore, that issue of loneliness can be overcome. As what our president of CCMC Alumni Club, Guy Ross, has said just now, right? The quote from Mother Teresa is so relevant, right? Of all the diseases, loneliness is the worst. And so we are all aware of it today, and we know how to deal with it. Thank you all so much for being part of our CCMC Certified Chief Master Coach Let's Coach Live Masterclass. We have this activity every month, and we certainly look forward to seeing you again next month. Please feel free to join and invite other people so that they can benefit. We have a compelling vision to bring coaching culture all over the world, coaching everywhere, so people can receive and give coaching. And not only that, we have a 100 million leaders mandate to positively touch the lives of 100 million leaders all over the world with sponsored coaching programs and solutions. Thank you so much again, Nick Jonsson. We would love to have you back again. And of course, thank you for your complimentary offer of your book. We would love to read it and support your work. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, all the CCMC participants, alumni, and the committee members. Good night. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Thank you, Nick.